Oh, I mean,
Sorry.
that's all right. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Early Childhood Recruitment and Retention Work Group meeting. It is June 6th, 2022. And I was just giving an update on a kind of quick moving activity for recruitment and retention. And that some of you may have been at the steering committee. We talked about possibly a training site using a local nonprofit childcare center to help begin moving potential untrained staff into some training and actual on-site practicum prior to being interviewed for a position in early childhood in the region. So I was just telling the group that this is moving quickly, and I have a meeting this Saturday, which is I think June 11th at the site to talk about potential work at that facility. So Andrea, I don't have the updated work plan. I want to make sure I have the updated work plan.
Hey, Amy, can I just ask a couple questions about that project?
Sure.
So Scott Noyes, who you mentioned, is his expertise early education and childcare? Yeah, it is. Okay. And the project as it will be funded, will that really focus on Scott coaching the CCUV staff to be mentors and coaches, or is there an aspect of this program that is actually going to potentially open CCUV as a training site? Like I'm just trying to wonder what you can do for 25,000 and sort of what is the sequencing of things that would need to happen, or would he be doing the training? I guess I would just like to understand that a little bit better.
So we need to go through the space, but what I understand is that the physical space has some potential as far as they had kind of planned on doing something with a one-way observation room and that type of thing. It never was finished. And then we would need funding to upgrade the kind of the discussion. We're still in the discussion phase, but after we do an assessment of the site, I'd spoken to Scott, and like I said, Scott Noyes does and Sharon put it in the chat. You can see his work at Empowering Programs. He does the ECE apprenticeship mentor training for the state of Vermont. So he's and that particular training is actually affiliated with Castleton/Northern Vermont University it's a 4-credit program. Not 4, but like it's a college credit program, 3 credit. So so he has that. We don't have to build that. That's something, and he also does coaching. So what we were looking at is costs for renovating any of the space that might be needed, the cost of his training, their staff, their potential mentors at their program, because any observations that are done at that site need to be done with high quality programming, and then any kind of upgrades that the classrooms might need. So the cost of the training for his time and for the staff time, the cost of any equipment or potential changes to the environment would be the initial costs. Okay. That we were looking at as being like the first phase. At the same time, we can be bringing these people on board, which we are now, bringing them on board and getting them. The other piece is that soft skills piece. And he and I are teaming up to create some a package for soft skills. Once we get through that, then I can see the idea of building mentors in other parts, in other centers, whether that's done on that as a training site, or whether Scott goes to, we could potentially use Scott and have him go to, we could cohort a group up, he could coach them on site, that type of thing. We're still pulling those pieces together, but at least there's some sort of forward motion toward getting it implemented, getting that started. My goal would be, come the beginning of the school year in September, that we are in the training phase of those staff, and that we're already working on the soft skills. We have a month's worth of training for potential staff before they go out into the world. So we're kind of going to be a month of behind the rest of that project. That's where we are right now, but it's huge. I think it's a big step to start somewhere, to put the shovel in the ground and say, we're going to start somewhere. Yeah. So this is where, when we get the document finished, as far as the recruitment and retention programs, whether they're OJT, apprenticeship, practicum, I think the solid piece here would be New Hampshire puts a lot of value into Scott Noyes in New Hampshire, and in Vermont, he already has an apprenticeship relationship. He's the mentor trainer in the state. I think we've kind of reached that piece that we needed for the mentoring, at least the mentoring portion. And then I think he can really help guide us with the information that we get from this group into what pathways are going to work the best for different, whether it's a mentor and a lead teacher, that's the mentor for a lead teacher that has that experience, for a new hire that's already been hired and onboarding them, or if it's a potential hire. So those are the pieces that we're working with: the lead teachers, the staff, new hire staff or inexperienced staff, and then your potential hires that you haven't seen apply yet. We need to build all of those pieces, but if the mentoring piece is pretty much ready to go, then we need to get that started. So
Amy, can I ask a question too?
Sure.
Thanks. So yeah, Scott is highly regarded in Vermont, definitely. So a couple questions. One is, will the mentors that are being trained, are they actually going to receive college credit through this funding as one piece of this project?
So Scott and I talked about that. We're gonna discuss it more, because we have to kind of balance what their bandwidth is, with the extra that it's going to take to make it so that they're eligible for the college credit. So we're going to look at that. What we decided to do, Scott and I talked about that. What we decided to do is kind of do this walkthrough, talk about what the best case scenario would be to get this up and going, and then what is the gap between that and the college credit. And if it's not much, then we'll try to get them there. But if it requires like a whole bunch of work, then we may do that at a later date. And we may make it a fourth module or something like that.
And so did you talk to Brenda Schramm at Vermont AUIC about how they structure the credit for the mentors? Was that helpful?
Yes,
Good.
thank you. All of that. And it's funny because it led back to Scott Noyes, who I know anyway.
Yes.
It's okay. It's great, because it really adds like structure that we don't have in the States. If we did this, it would cross New Hampshire and Vermont. That would make it so much easier. So if he trained people in New Hampshire with the same level that we train Vermont, then they could go across the river and it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
They can be a mentor in your ECE apprenticeship program. Like we would be doing that, right? So that's the goal. What we're looking at for this group is to just figure out what the lift is for the group. So
That's
what
great.
their bandwidth is, what the lift is. And we had already looked at 6 2-hour sessions as a base, and then looking at beyond that. So we'll talk to Brenda, because Scott does the training, Brenda kind of turns it into college credit. So what we'll do is we'll build it, and then we'll talk to Brenda and say what is left, what's the gap. And then
Thank you. And I get, my other question is related to the two-way mirror or the renovations of the space. Can you tell me more about that and the purpose of having a two-way mirror
So the
or
kind
window,
of,
whatever the technical, I'm sure I don't have
whatever
the
it
language
is.
correct.
Yeah, I know. It's like what they use in police stations or something like that.
Yeah.
So the idea is, or the kind of barrier that we're trying to leap here is the barrier of people not having, well, first of all, in New Hampshire, we have a major barrier of waiting for criminal record checks. So that's a big barrier for us. You know, they're saying 4 weeks, it's more like 8, but we're going to go with the 4. There is, I mean, some limitation in the state of Vermont. If you don't want somebody to wait and their criminal record check takes 2 to 3 weeks, I'm hearing sometimes it takes 1, which would be wonderful if that's what they did all the time. And we don't want to put too much pressure on a classroom, as far as if we had 8 people needing to do observations, we don't want them in and out of the classroom. Like, that's just, you know, when you add somebody to the classroom, it changes the dynamics of the interactions in the classroom. And what you want to see is pure interaction. You want to see how, that's why we want to invest and have really great teachers that can be models and mentors. So if they're,
who's doing the observing? I guess that's what I don't understand is,
okay.
is it if Scott, I'm just trying to understand the concept. So if Scott is training the lead teachers and they will be mentoring new hires.
The concept is that Scott trains up the lead teachers.
Mm-hmm,
They are trained as mentors. Then we can design something where there's some like soft interactions where people can do observations of children. I mean, one of the top things that directors, lead teachers have asked for of new hires is redirecting children. How to redirect, like if there's one way that a new hire can support a lead teacher is how to redirect a child back to what they need to be doing. Yeah. And like I said, if we had, I don't know if we'd have 1 person, if we'd have 2 people, if we'd have 3 people observing in a classroom, it might put a lot of pressure on the kids to.
So are the people doing the observing the prospective employees?
No.
Or the mentors?
The idea is that these prospective employees would get classroom practicum observation without impacting the classroom to the degree of being in the classroom.
Okay, so in some classes, they might do a video to do the observation, but you're saying they're going to come and observe actual classrooms where that's a similar experience, but they're not interacting with children and being mentored to change their practice.
So so this would be new. The first of all, we were thinking there's lots of ideas of what we could do with this, but one of them is that our new hires that do not have a criminal record check, they can be in the building, they cannot interact with children. They can actually volunteer in the classroom, but they can't. So they can't get paid, but without a criminal record check. So if it were a training session on, say, redirecting, they could actually go in. There could be a cohort of 4 people with an instructor, a trainer, whether it's Scott or someone else. These are new employees, potential employees, have not been, hired in a center yet. And they could observe interactions with children and teachers without impacting the classroom to a great degree, and without having without having their criminal background check back yet.
So families will know that their children are being observed by people who are not currently employees?
Yes. Yeah. So here the concept is like in a lab school. that it's discounted, that you get, that's kind of perked to be able to use your child. It's kind of like when you go to Dartmouth, it's learned, it's a residency. You'll be asked 16 times, like, your information by 6 different doctors and blah, 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 and they team and all of that. The concept is sort of like a lab school. And I've talked to, oh boy, Deirdre McPartland down in Keene.
I don't know her.
At Keene, so Keene State has a lab school. But and so we talked about the lab school experience. We talked about the impact on the kids. We talked about, you know, with their people that come in, they come in for a course and they stay there. They don't breeze through for an observation,
Right.
for a training. It is a 4-year degree. Like, they're there and they're there to stay. And that's typically how it's done, only we're hiring people and they're not in a 4-year degree program. They're not going to be there.
And you aren't using educators that have been trained to train other educators. You're training up your mentors simultaneously, it sounds like, or just slightly prior
hopefully they'll
to.
be yeah, and they'll be coached, and they won't do the lab school, they do the training. This is an observation site. This is for people to see how it's supposed to work. Like, this is how you error correct. This is how you redirect behavior. But the mentors aren't meant to give them like a college level experience. That's not where we are with this.
Right. I understand that. And that makes total sense. And so then the next step for these new hires is that, like, what is the next step? So, because like the true training happens when they interact with children and then they receive coaching. So I wonder, like, what's the next step?
So the dream is that they go into they go interview at like Ruth Center. They decide to hire this person and they go to an experienced, hopefully mentor trained staff and work under them. It would be great to have every classroom have a trained mentor teacher.
So could you expand the opportunity of the mentor training earlier so that you have trained mentors in multiple sites versus just the children's center staff?
Right.
I'm just thinking, like, systematically, like how the rollout.
Yeah. That's the plan. We were actually ready to roll that out into other centers, but we were trying to figure out, what are we going to do for mentoring? What does it look like? Who are the people that how much time is it going to take? What's that assessment going to look like? And so that's what I'm asking Scott to help us build. And since we don't have to build most of the pedagogy part, he's got that. I feel like maybe by Christmas, we would be training mentors in classrooms and sending these new hires to a center that has a trained mentor. In public school, when I worked in public school, I had a mentor for 2 years.
Yeah, it really is. I mean, that's such a great retention strategy to be able to have that support built in. And I'm wondering if, how many of the programs that these new hires might go to are already connected to mentors that have been trained by Scott through Vermont AUIC, and it will transition into the apprenticeship program in Vermont, on the Vermont side at least, so that you don't have to train all the mentors, because there are trained mentors already out there. So it would be interesting to think about, because these are all prospective hires, is there an opportunity to partner with particular programs that already have trained mentors, and maybe there's the hiring pool is targeted where they're going to receive that support. I'm just trying to think about ways that it might roll out while you're simultaneously building it for those other programs that don't have trained mentors yet.
The other kind of stitch here is that you can only hire so many people and mentor so many people and have so many new people. And what we're trying to do is get as many people some experience and ahead of the process. So there also may be an opportunity where people are embedded and being trained on site at this training site. And then for X, and the other issue is them getting paid. We have a group of people a small group of people, but that could do this and not get paid. They could do this for 3 hours, 2 or 3 times a week, go in, go through a formal training process or whatever. And then we have people who need a job. So we've got a couple, we've been strategizing some different ways to possibly have them either split, be shared at a center, or if it's a larger center that could use them at least 3 days a week. And then we grab them 1 day a week for training, like a full training. Scott would have them like every Wednesday. And they would either do a college level course that day, or they would work on a college level 3-credit course that day, or they would go through the CDA process that day. So whichever, or they'll do foundations that day, or fundamentals. They would do fundamentals that day. So whatever, they would get their employment, because we would pay them, the program would pay them for their training day, and they would have subbing others days under trained mentors. And then you wouldn't have to hire them full time. Like, you can't use somebody. It's always nice, right, Ruth, to have somebody sub and then they're like, I'm going to offer them a job. Then you're not rolling the dice and investing in somebody that isn't going to work out just because they don't really fit your team, and not because they're not any good. They just may not fit your team. And the other thing is, we hope to guide them. We've had people quit because they couldn't transfer from an infantile room to a preschool room. They asked their director, can I go to the preschool room? And they're like, we don't have a preschool opening right now. So they quit the field. It's like, we can, yeah.
I have to move and my people around all the time, and we have people who prefer one room or another. And I try really hard with my staff to have most of the people comfortable in all areas, but it is hard. And that takes a lot of negotiating and getting people, when they are moving from room to room, there's always got to be somebody that's helping them learn the ropes in that room. So it's interesting.
And the tricky part of the CDA is that it really is a focus on infant, toddler, or preschool. So if they're doing a CDA for one age group and then you're trying to move them around, they might not have the continuum based on their credential. So that's another like complicated piece of the training.
So I have a question about that. Like, I don't ever offer anybody new, I don't ever say to them, hey, go do your CDA. I just don't use it. So I either tell them to, depending on their goals, to either take fundamentals or to start with intro to early ed and go down that path. I don't know what other people are doing, but I just have not found the whole CDA process to be all that as valuable as one of those two options. And maybe I'm wrong in that, but that is just kind of how it's worked for the new people that I have had. For that very reason, they might not know if they want to do infants and toddlers or if they're going to do preschool. They just don't know. I want them to be able to function in all areas.
So the CDA courses are, everybody takes all the same courses.
Right.
It's the focus comes in when they do at the portfolio stage. And then they do their portfolios either in the infant, toddler, or the preschool. I think that
once you get your CDA, you can interchange. Right?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you're not stuck there. But I think that the barrier of, and I've talked to quite a few people about this, but the barrier to the college piece is that it's not self-paced and it's not flexible. And people just aren't there. Like, most people are raising kids right now, they just can't commit and go down the path of 9 credits or 18 credits.
Right.
They need something much more flexible.
That's why I tend to move the kind of direct people in that category more towards taking fundamentals, which, although it's not necessarily self-directed, it's at least like portioned out, so I don't know. That's something I would have to think a little. I've not had anybody who has pursued a CDA. So
I never,
That would
and
be
I would
nice.
never believed in the CDA. I've always been like college person, but we have found, and it's not the CDA of yesteryear, like the CDA that
Mhm.
I knew. It
Right.
is a lot more intensive. And if we do it this way with a CDA and mentoring, I don't think it's going to be any less valuable than taking a college course. I had a girl who's in like her 3rd year at Plymouth, who
Mhm.
was telling me about the theorist Piaget.
Mhm.
Like, are you listening? Like, who's Piaget? Piaget. What do you know? So it's not necessarily just, and it's opened my mind. It's opened my mind. NEYC is embracing the CDA. I
Mhm.
think any kind of delivery that is and I don't think intensive works either. Like the fast tracks.
Right.
How do you fast track somebody in child development? Okay, this year we're going to do the. Okay, now we're there 3, and now we're going to
Yeah.
now that doesn't work either. But if you can do something, a formal training with mentoring, the mentoring has like so much power.
Mhm.
And that's where it doesn't matter what they've had. If it's fundamentals and mentoring, it's going to enhance fundamentals.
I guess one of my things is, since right now going through the Teach program for people is free, and it's a huge benefit to centers because we're also not paying tuition. But I'm just wondering how that functions, because right now, if you have somebody and you're saying to them, hey, I want you to go in and consider the Teach program, they have to pick either doing their certificate or they have to go into a college track. They're still taking courses that apply to college because we're trying to move them not just from being new, but to kind of move towards getting to be a lead teacher and getting those 12 credits out of the way. So I'm trying to envision how this would work with that, because you're saying that there's funding for this initially, I guess, as a pilot to get it up and going. But what happens down the road with how that would be paid for? Are there thoughts about that?
That is, I'm hoping that at least in the state of New Hampshire, that they see this as valuable enough as being one of the starting points. They're not going to be opening, and even, when I talked to the director at Keene State Lab and they said that River Valley is right there on site now. And I was like, that's wonderful. So you can have those people do their practicum at your site. And she said, no, they don't allow a 2-year program to integrate with a 4-year program.
Mhm.
So where are those 4-year program people going from Keene State? She said they're leaving the state. They're not even staying here and teaching. They're taking a public school job somewhere else. So that's not a good pipeline for us. I would love that.
If they stay in Vermont and they get a job in Vermont, they can get, tuition assistance, like loan repayment assistance. So like, that's what I would like those folks at Keene to know, is that if they take a job in Vermont, they can apply for $4,000 a year toward loan forgiveness from Vermont.
Right.
So like, let's keep them here. How do we keep them here?
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
They're going to need insurance.
And that's more for me. That's the one thing about like going through the Teach program and kind of directing my people there. What's valuable to me there is they stay over a period of time. They have to have, if they're someone who needs apprenticeship, they have to have a mentoring teacher. And they know that they're working towards a goal where it's also going to benefit them financially, because one, they'll have the education, which they can use anywhere, but 2, I'm guaranteeing I'm going to give them an increase in salary when they finish. So for me, there's long-term incentive for somebody to stay, even if they're only planning to do like a certificate and do 7 courses, that's going to take them time to get done. So you're looking at a period of time where you have a little bit of a commitment. So I'm just trying to envision how this whole piece work.
I guess one thing I would say is that rather than getting hung up on which pathway is best, like we need to think about developing multiple alternative
Yes.
pathways into the field, right? I mean, and teach might be a great option for a subset of learners.
Mhm.
CDA may be a better option for a subset of learners. A direct mentoring, kind of more pre-apprentice, more supportive pathway might be a better option for another, right, subset of potential
Exactly.
providers. So I guess I would just, you know, I think it would just be helpful for us to think about all the multiple ways of getting that funnel, that pipeline of people into the field as big as possible. And then, you know, trying to serve them as best once we have them engaged, right? Which I think is what Amy, you're talking about here, you know, and how, because we're losing too many people in that period between when they say they're interested, they might be engaging a little bit, but then too many things happen and then they move on, you know, like how we got to hook them early and have different ways of hooking them.
I would agree with that. That's what I was trying to say is I think that there's many ways of getting to the goal and everybody's going to fit in a different kind of way and
Yeah.
just making sure we're focusing on all those things.
And the
Yeah.
key is good advising, because if someone shows up and they already have some credits or they already have some related, like it's really about advising them when they come into that wide part of the funnel. And then the other piece is to help them figure out what's the right pathway, because what we know is that the early childhood training pathway is twists and turns that lead people to nowhere. And so if they end up on the wrong pathway, they don't really help themselves and they don't really help the program because they don't have the flexibility to serve in different roles. They don't have the opportunity to advance. And we know that people are underpaid. So if we want people to be compensated, we need to have clear, understood training and what you need for your career goals. And so I think that some of the people that you probably are encountering are people that are not sure if early childhood is right for them. And so their pathway is very different than someone who comes in and says, I need a job, I want to work with children, and what do I need to do do this for the long haul? And I think that that's the piece that is really important because, you know, I worked in a program for 8 years. I had a revolving door of assistant teachers in that time. And oftentimes it was because they started down one training pathway and it was a dead end for them. So I just caution us to not create more fragmentation and more systems that get people lost, because that is just as much of a reason that people don't stay in the field. I really appreciated what you said, Ruth, about it keeps people for the long haul, because there are supports built into, like it looks like you're replicating a lot of the model of the teach that has like training and mentoring. Like that model is amazing. And so that's a really good thing. But I think that it's being careful not to just create more confusion about how to get people on the path that's going to help them advance the farthest. Because to be honest, you know, in Vermont, we're really looking at the advancing as a profession, and the criteria to be an early childhood educator is going up. And CDA is not going to be enough. So if you get them in a CDA, that's fine if they know what's their next step. Like, so I have my CDA, I'm in a program, what's my next step? So a lot of it, I think, is about career advising. So if you can build career advising into your curriculum with Scott, I think that, you know, career exploration and career advising would be so helpful, because I don't think there's enough of that. So that would just be a suggestion.
I would totally agree, because that's why I'm trying to like guide some of my newer people into certain paths to getting there, because I know that the advancing the profession is moving along, and I don't want them to be frustrated when they get to a point where, oh, well, I could have qualified for this if I had just taken this route, but now I'm not there. So now I have to backtrack to get to, I don't want to be a level 1, I want to be a 2. So how do I get there? So I think that that's
Yeah.
important to keep in mind, is what their ultimate goal is. Yes, I do agree that you need to get something in place right when somebody is showing interest, and the mentoring piece is huge for that, I believe. And it's something that I think can be developed in different ways, not just for people just starting in the field, but how are we mentoring people across their practice?
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead,
I
go
was
ahead.
gonna say-
Thanks.
Thank you. I think the advancing the profession framework is lovely, but that is going to be dependent on policy change at the state level that will recognize early educators as professionals that should be paid on par with public school educators. Now that's happening in Vermont. So if you're in Vermont and you see these pathways and you see opportunities for advancement and compensational event and all those things, great. But that doesn't exist in New Hampshire. So again, we'll end up with these, I keep focusing on these emerging inequities within the Upper Valley between how providers can operate in New Hampshire and how providers can operate in Vermont. And I think we need to just kind of recognize that we are talking about two very different environments here.
Mhm.
I
So,
wanted to, my name is Katie Jenks, and I actually do the training for the CDA through the ECA. And I just wanted to point out, I'm hearing a lot of conversation back and forth about the college versus the CDA. And right now, I am boots on the ground. I am the one talking to these providers, or in most of my situation, it's people that are interested. They have absolutely no concept of a college education at this point. They're barely graduating high school. When they think of college, they think of expense and they think of money, and they immediately say, absolutely not. So a big part of what I do is say, okay, let's try the CDA. Let's see if we can get you in a classroom. Let's see if we really, let's see if you really enjoy this field. And then the next step that I take is to say, okay, let's get you enrolled and let's see what we can do about finding you some college, tuition help. We'll get some more classes. Let's build on this. And it seems to be working. Just FYI, that tends to be a really big motivator. I taught college and they shut down immediately. I had a conversation with somebody just the other day, and she wants to be in a classroom, but she cannot even fathom the idea of going to even a 2-year, 4-year, anything college related. She just shuts down. The CDA being more online at this point, with the possibility of somebody actually being able to see in the classroom, be in the classroom, mentored, at least gives them the opportunity to say, yes, this is what I look for. This is what I'm looking forward to doing. So I just wanted to share with you that, I know specifically, me working with the ECA, we really do gear towards getting them educated. So that is important
Well,
to us.
That's really helpful, because that's the whole piece. It's the support and the mentoring and the advising. And that's critical. It really is.
At onset, we screen them. And if they are 6 credits from an associate's degree or 10, 12 credits, we don't let them in the CEA. You're like, we need to get you your associate's degree. But if we have what I'm talking to Marina Cole about, is she's encountering people who they don't see themselves as learners. They are, but they cannot see themselves as a learner in college. And when they can do these CDA courses with a coach, with Katie, and they can pace it themselves and it fits into their life, they actually come out the other side. And we had somebody who interviewed in Vermont and said, I will never take a college credit. She told their director, I did not like school, when I was there, and I'm not going to college. She got her CDA, she aced her test, and it's like a peer review test. It's like you have to be supervised when you take is a lot of pressure. And now she sees herself as a learner. And now that's a pathway to get her into college, and it's paid for in Vermont and in New Hampshire too. There's plenty of ways to get it paid for. The other thing that comes in, and I just is like my last pitch for keeping that funnel nice and open, is that I've had at least 2 people work for me that had associate's degrees in early childhood, and I wouldn't leave them alone in a classroom. That's one thing. And then I've had plenty of people that just were moms. They could not go to college. They just could not fit it into their schedule. And they did the CDA route, and they were wonderful because they were wonderful before. The other thing is about pathways is that sometimes, and I would love, Sharon, if this were something that could be worked out, maybe in the New Hampshire side, is I come across people with defaulted loans. They do not have their associate's degree, so they don't qualify for the forgiveness, and they didn't pay their $80 fee, and they flunked the class, and now they can't go back to college because
Amy,
they
I'm
have
so glad you bring this up, because this is a
Sure, it's around
huge
that.
issue everywhere. And so I can tell you, as you're talking to philanthropists who are looking to support your members, Vermont AUIC just had someone approach them about how could we support people in their pathway, to be credentialed, and all these things, and that came up. And so they've actually just formed, and I don't even think it's been announced yet, but they just they have someone who is willing to have flexible funding that can be used for things like that. And it's going to be administered through Vermont AUIC. So if you have anybody that's in Vermont, that's their situation, but you might be able to build the same thing. And it's, because people want to make a difference, and that is an important way to make a difference. It is such an important thing to bring up.
Somebody completed their CDA. They had defaulted on a loan less than $2,000, and they wanted to go back into the field, and they needed that cleaned up. I think the CDA shows they have a commitment. I think it shows that they are serious. They're going to stay in the field, and they have the capacity to follow through with something now. And maybe they did it when they were 18 years old, and that's why they flunked. I had a girl that I hired through New Hampshire Work Program. They talk about advising, Sharon. She took 2 online courses, never taken a college course. She struggled in high school. She took 2 online courses for her first experience in school. Got locked out, she said, of her password. Never communicated that to me, even though I checked in with her weekly to see how it's going. She said everything was fine. Bombed out both classes and now owes them. And she will never go back to school because she owes like $3,000. And there's no way that she lives in low-income housing. There's no way she's going to pay that and go back to school. But if she had showed me and completed her CDA and showed me that she was going to stay and she was going to work hard, I would have paid that off for her so that she could continue on her path. But there's so many different, there just needs to be more doorways, and we will be careful, Sharon, you can keep us on track so that we're not getting fragmented. And maybe we have a training center that has, a Sharon Harrington advising. Maybe we have a Sharon's daughter, something that does the advising, and that's a major piece. And
Amelia Struthers, that's her job.
Struthers does, but we can't advise them away from the CDA. We can't be, trying to advise them into college. We've got to advise them into what fits into their life. And we've had plenty, I don't know about you, but I know RBC, she's not here, but I don't know how their fast track does, but it isn't 100% for everybody. It works. It's a wonderful idea, but fast track isn't the only answer to this issue. So
I agree.
Well, and I'll just say I started out with the CDA, and I was an adult college student. I did not attend college until I was well on my way into my 2nd or 3rd career. So I can relate to the things that you're saying, and I think that part of our job is to help people see that how they can be successful, and show that we believe in them, so that because that's empowering rather than to assume that they can't. So I have been in those shoes, and I and I worked in a center before I had a degree. So I do know exactly what you're talking about. So I don't want you to think that I'm like oblivious to it, that I'm like,
No,
was highly educated as an early childhood educator early on. That's not my story. So I think that the most important thing we can do is build in supports. And I
Mhm.
put in the chat, some states, they're doing cohorts similar to what you're talking about. And it is a college course, but they're embedding childcare, they're embedding, tutoring, all of those things that help them to see themselves, as you said, the learner that because we want highly trained people educating our young children. And I know we're in a workforce crisis, but like this can't be our long-term future, that we just are going to try to have the minimum training to get people in the door because we're in a crisis. So I keep thinking about today and the future. So
I would agree and echo that. My previous life, I was an academic advisor in an adult learning program at a college. That's what I did. That was my passion, to help people restart going to school, or if they've never been in school and all of a sudden now they're 30 years old and they have 2 kids, how do they go to school? And so my thing is always thinking about, yes, you need to have things for people who may never want to go take a college course. But I just am trying to think through the mindset of what I hear going on. And I don't know as much about New Hampshire, but what I hear going on in Vermont is this increasing pressure for people to have more education in order to meet minimum requirements for things. And so my strategy is always trying to find whatever fits best for that person initially. And that's why I said that the support system that you build and the advising piece to help people along the way is crucial. So that part of the model I think is great. And I agree with you. So one of the programs I worked with was accelerated education for adult learners. We did all cohorts. People went through their degrees as a cohort, course to course to course, one course at a time. And they built in things like access to childcare, mentoring, all of that. So thinking about that as long-term strategies, there's a lot of things about cohort learning that is really, really important for adult learners. I'm still friends with the first cohorts that I advised. They still keep in touch with each other, and I advised at that time nursing students. So they were going from RNs that may have taken some college courses or that went through just a training that got them to their RN, all the way to finishing their BSN. So there's a lot of value to adult education and hitting it from all different sides. So I appreciate you bringing that up.
I just
And I'll
want to throw in here too that sorry, Sharon, go ahead.
No, because I feel like I've monopolized this meeting and I didn't mean to do that.
No, I think everybody's passionate has a lot of information. So
5 or 6 years ago, and don't trust me because I'm terrible at remembering dates. Family childcare owners, maybe Ruth, they weren't required to have fundamentals. And we knew that when the regs were being revised, they were going to need to have fundamentals. And there was a lot of anxiety in the field. And so we spent the year or two leading up to that, helping people to get into that, mindset that I can do this. And so that by the time those new regs came out, most of them had already taken fundamentals by choice before they felt like they had to. And it wasn't that long ago that Head Start required, associate's degrees and bachelor's degrees for their staff, which previously had not been the case. And that was a huge shift. So I think it's, it does feel like, it may feel like there's a lot of pressure right now, but I feel like it's been raising, over time. And I think that it's like part of, I think what we do is we often try to help those that we are worried about. And sometimes they don't need our help. Like they can do it, and we just need to believe that they can do it, and they help them believe they can do it. So I just feel like watching those, family childcare program owners who'd been operating their business for 20 years and didn't have fundamentals, and they were so anxious. It was really like they were all going to close their programs. And with good supports, they were able to do what they needed to do before they even needed to have it. And then they felt really good about it. So it feels like this is not a new conversation, but it's a complicated one. So I'll stop.
What I'm hearing everybody talk about is being really, really mindful of the ecosystem for workforce development that already exists and the parts of it that are not working right now, and how to introduce something else so that it's connected to all of those things. Like, no, I want to restate that because everything is already connected. The problem is when we put things in and don't anticipate those connections and don't do it intentionally. So I think once we have this inventory, which is coming, someone who is not me, but someone should make a map, not just a list, but a map of opportunities based on geography, resources, whatever makes sense, so that when you put something new in, you can see where the connections are, how it's going to feed into this, how it might end up a dead end here, how if you take this path, it's going to keep you from doing these other ones, how if you take this path, actually, it opens you up to 6 more. If we just, alter this path a little bit, it'll open up 10 options for people. And I think the other piece of what we're talking about here is like, I love that we're being aware of how important it is for people to see themselves as learners, as adults. And I'm excited about the retention opportunities for people who've been in the field for a long time, have very, very few advanced learning opportunities. That's always a complaint with trainings, is that there's not enough advanced learning to do for ongoing professional development. This is ongoing professional development. This is like I mean, honestly, like I'm thinking of some teachers that I knew at the Parent Child Center. It's like, this person is the most stellar infant toddler teacher I've ever known in my life. She's very soft-spoken. She's not somebody who sees herself as a leader, but I want her legacy out there in the field. Are you kidding me? I want her to train 25 people. She's never going to see herself that way without support, though. And being a really stellar infant toddler teacher is a very specific set of skills, right? Mm-hmm. So I think that also doing that intentionally as well, because that is part of the ecosystem. Like, in order to keep people, especially when it's hard, especially when they're getting underpaid, especially when, there's all these other stressors, making it meaningful, people will do a lot for something that's meaningful. They really will, because that's dynamic, because they're part of a community. So like, and I'm not, we don't want them doing less for the amount they're getting paid. We want it to be meaningful as we're getting the bar raised on their wages, right? So I think that's another really important part to be planful with this. And I've never met Scott, but I'm assuming that he's aware of that, the importance of that. But I think that's something to like be really thoughtful about, languaging that explicitly when we get to the point of this getting promoted or other opportunities like this getting promoted, is that it's a chance to deepen your skill set as a teacher. Because anytime you're teaching, you're also learning. That's like, so you're getting to continue to learn as you go, and also pass on what you know. So it's really important part of this too. And that it can happen without being like married to the loyalty of which center you work in. So if you're mentoring somebody at, CCUV or wherever you're mentoring them, if you have a workforce development program there, it's like, I'm mentoring you so that you can go choose which center you want to be a part of, because the whole field is connected to each other. It's not scarcity minded.
That mentoring piece is really important. One of my newer teachers needs apprenticeship. She needs to go through apprenticeship, even though she's done some work in centers. And right now, I didn't really have a teacher that I thought was going to meet the criteria to mentor her. I found out that that wasn't the case. But if that had been the case, my first thing that I started to do was to reach out and find out, well, where can I find mentoring teachers who don't work in my center that can come in and observe and mentor? Because maybe there's a teacher at XYZ center in our area that has an excellent infant toddler teacher that I really would like that person to be the mentor. So building those kinds of programs where we have that and we know, like, who can we go to? You know, if say I have a teacher who has a lot of experience, but she's moving from infants and toddlers to pre-K. Okay, where do I find a really good pre-K teacher to mentor her if I don't really want it to be just one person in my center who's mentoring everybody? So we all try to work together, but it just, that was one of the things. The first thing I did was reach out and say to, like, I contacted somebody from Let's Grow Kids, and I'm like, okay, so how do I find out, like, where can I find mentors? So I think that that's a really great thing to think of, is having a pool of people that you know are excellent in what they do that can help people in all stages of their career.
Andrea, do we need to do any cleanup on or checking back in with some action steps, or do you, I'm not sure which version I'm looking at, so.
One thing we did have a question about was the recommendations to temporary and permanent changes to rules and regs.
Yep, I got your email about that. I had a difficult couple weeks. And so I had started that for Vermont, and I've gone through, there's not as many barriers that I came across that were significant. So I just want to go back and review one more time to see if I'm missing anything. And if anybody else wants to put eyes on it as well. My major thing, which never got answered by the Child Development Division in licensing, was about hiring high school students that are not currently in a human services program, that are like on a college career track. They still haven't gotten back to me about that, because it's a problem. We have, like, you know, high schoolers who aren't even old enough to be in the grade that they need to be in to actually determine that they're going to go into human services, but yet regs say they only have to be 15. So you have a 15-year-old who hasn't made that declaration yet, and you can't hire them. So that was my one main thing. And then I've gone through and looked at a few other things, but I don't have like a long list of things. So I really want to take another run through of the parts that I was concerned about.
And Ruth,
So
you
I
probably
guess I
already,
would ask Amy. Go ahead.
oh, sorry. I was just say, Ruth, you probably know this, but they just recently went through all the regs, and the proposed changes, I believe, are up on the website. I'll look in a minute here and see if they're there. One of the things that I thought was a really good sign was that they were talking about the possibility of directors on site for 50% of the time, which will be really helpful for smaller programs to be able to, if they could hire a director, a director can serve in 2 programs, which is going to be a great asset for, the shortage of directors that we know is happening. So
Yep.
I'll try to find that, put it in the chat in case you want it in the notes.
Yeah, that would be great, because those are the kinds of things that really do cause issues. But I haven't, when I did my initial run through, I didn't see like a lot of things that were like big red flags to me. There were a few. And that was one, and not being able to get an answer from Child Development, even though they said, oh, we had four different directors contact us this week to find out how they could do this. And I just was asking, can I do a variance, and what doing it? And they were like, well, nobody's ever done that before. Well, high schoolers can be really great additions. So even if it's just a couple hours a week filling in at the end of the day or something. So those kinds of things. I just want to take another gander through it, but I just went through a whole round of closing and things like that. So it's been a little rough.
Yeah, I would say the important thing would be if there's anything in these proposed changes that are important,
Mhm.
you know, to make sure that people take advantage of the public comment period. That would just be something I
Yep.
would suggest.
Sharon, are you signed up for the EC listserv, the community discussion list?
Yes.
Okay. I would post that to that site to
Okay.
spur people to do the public comment. That would be great. So what will be the next steps then? Like Ruth, you know, once you go through it, Amy, how do you want to connect with Ruth and come up with something together that's a set of recommendations specific for our area? Because that's where this idea initially came from, was like, you know,
Yeah, I think
looking at
Amy already did
our
that.
issues in our area. So. Mhm.
I think Amy did something about that and sent it to me, or was that just on the languaging? I think that was the languaging piece. So, yeah, we can connect. I don't know if there's a document that you want to put it in, Amy? And
'Cause I'm
maybe
assuming
separate it by
once-
Vermont and New Hampshire?
Yeah, I'm assuming once it's put together, you want to bring that back to this group then for some kind of decision making on what to do about that.
If there is anything to do, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's why it would be really helpful for me to know more. I know that they're proposing new changes, like, and I tried to be part of that, but I wasn't selected for that. But it would be really helpful to me to know what proposed changes are there so far. And that, so I don't know if I can get access to that information, but that would be really helpful.
Well, and I just realized that what's up on the website is not the newest changes. I'm going to check my email and I'll see if I can forward it.
That would be
they haven't
really
updated
great.
the website.
Yeah, because there's, you know, if it's already being proposed to change, the likelihood is that it will change. So I don't want to recreate something that's already existing. I don't want to put something on the list with Amy that is no longer going to be an issue.
Well, the link that was just sent around, there are links to proposed regulation revisions. Are those not the proposed new regs?
I don't think it's the most recent work group
Yeah.
information.
That's
So
the
I'm gonna
If
thing.
you click
try to
it,
find
it's
it.
dated like April 2022. So
Okay.
Yeah. So that, yes, normally that's where you would find it. But I think that the work group has continued to work. And I don't have what's posted is probably not the latest revision of it. But that's
I'll dig around, Ruth, and I'll get it to you and Amy.
Thank you. That's also the hard part about this, is that regs change every year, just about. So trying to keep up with it can be a little challenging.
So yeah, I mean, Amy, you were asking about next steps. I guess that I would kind of bounce that back to you all and find out what you want, what you plan for the timing to be, to have something to bring back to this group so we can discuss, if anything, what we can do with that information.
Yeah, Amy, if you just let me know like when you need it, I'll work on it. Like I said, I was out for a couple weeks, so it was kind of hard.
Just thinking if we made our own kind of, between you and I, internal version of the public comment page, just like make a blank one for us that we can start responding to in.
Okay.
I
don't know.
format, here's the rule, here's the issue with it, and then it leaves spaces for what you do with it. So maybe we send it to public comment with you know, advice from this group to we add it to the public comment section. That makes the most sense to me. Kind of keep it organized in the same way.
Is New Hampshire reviewing their regs now as well?
They already did. They made their changes and we're trying to digest them right now. But what New Hampshire did was they actually got a book club together a group of people, 8-10 people got together, reviewed them, took pieces apart, reviewed them, met together, met with directly with licensing to come up with and negotiate the pieces that were negotiable. That's
Interesting.
it was very informal but powerful, because the people that were doing it were the people that had to deal with the changes that were being made, and there were still some that were made that we're still really, really, really struggling with. And I think one of the things, like for all of this, is best case scenario in the future. I mean, in the 90s, we had practicum, and we had, you know, each state in New Hampshire, each state college, community college had a site, and they had a program, and we got people with practicum experience out of that. And we're just in a different place right now. And maybe that funnel changes, you know, in 5 years or in 2 years or 1 year. But I think right now is not how it's going to look. I'm not saying that right now is how it's going to look 20 years from now, but I do think the key piece of mentoring will never go away.
Right.
That piece will never go away. And that way, if the community college system does not, isn't able to bring back real structured practicum, and high school programs don't come back, then at least we could have these embedded mentoring programs. And maybe, you know, a new regulation in the future would be that the director had to spend so much time, you know, being mentored by another director or something like that. But we're in crisis times. Ruth, you just said, like, you just get done from closing again. Like, this is not a time to stick something. I love power to the profession. I wish everybody had a bachelor's degree, but at this point, I think we just need to kind of manage what we can, and try to support people as much as possible in their proper pathway. And as far as the regs go, same thing. Like, there are changes that may seem backwards, and there are changes that may seem like status quo or useless or whatever. I think we just need to look at the regulations and figure out, first I look for redundancy. They passed a whole bunch of regs during COVID that we had to do that were already in regulations. They did the COVID regs, were redundant. Cleaning rules and things like that were already in regs. So when they make new regulations, I always try to see if there's other regs that already cover that. Why do we need to add a rule that's covered by another rule? So one is redundancy is the first thing we looked for. And then the second thing was outside of like the health and safety kind of supervision of the state, because if it gets into your curriculum and your Montessori and it conflicts, then that's not necessarily where they should be, or the rule needs to be revised to be broader and more inclusive. And then the financial impact. It would be nice to hear about the financial impact of some of those regs. Michael?
Yeah, this is somewhat of an aside, but I want to put it in the mix just so it's out there. And Amy is certainly aware of this, but prior to the pandemic, we had been working with the Upper Valley Educators Institute, which is a sort of an alternative teacher preparation program based in Lebanon. And they have a principal training program as part of their teacher preparation programs. And we talked to them specifically about what it would take to build a kind of a peer mentoring and support program for directors of early education centers, as a way to build the capacity of directors as the instructional leaders as their centers, you know, because there's just a lot of research that director as instructional leader is what drives quality within early education centers. So I don't know what the pathway looks like for directors. I've heard from other advocates in New Hampshire that there aren't a lot of people in New Hampshire now that have the right credentials to be directors. I'm not sure what the current supports are for directors, but given the fact that they are overseeing staff and play a role in mentoring and coaching staff, although maybe they don't have the capacity to do that to the extent that they would want to or perhaps should, is there a role for some other institutions that exist within the Upper Valley, like the UVEI, to play a role within this broader kind of workforce development system that we're trying to imagine here? So I just wanted to kind of put that out there is something to think about as all this moves forward.
That's a great question. I think that what I've experienced, because I was new to being a director when I started 4 years ago, is what we have in Vermont are the networks. And so that's where you make connections with other directors, and hopefully you build some of those kind of mentoring, supportive relationships. I know some networks are very focused on more of the practice of the educators than they are necessarily on what the directors are dealing with. The network that I helped or have been trying to work with founding and getting started, it's been mostly directors. And we really do try to, like, you hit a problem, you hit a question, you're like, okay, what do I do about this? It's somebody to call. It's somebody who may have already dealt with it. That is really, really important. And for new directors coming on board, because you're seeing this turnover in directors, just like you're seeing in education administration in public schools.
Yeah.
And you're talking about how to maybe have a director in 2 centers. That's like a whole different level of management that you need to work with. And you have a lot of directors who are educators who became directors. And then you have directors who are more on the management and administration side of things, who are relearning some of their educational skills and teaching skills. So you have a broad mix there, but I do think support for directors is important, because you're right. You can have all the teachers in the world, but if you don't have a good director who's really focused on enhancing and improving the program, supporting, mentoring, and encouraging and empowering their staff, working with the families, if you don't have somebody who's to help to hold all those pieces together, it all starts to quickly crumble. And so I think that would be a great thing if there was ways to like build that and have that be part of what we're talking about, because losing directors that's, you know, my staff tell me all the time, if you leave, we're done. And they mean that in a sincere way, even though they've worked here a really long time. They're just kind of like, it's already so stressful. It's already a lot to do. We're already not paid, you know, that great. But if we had to take on doing what you do as well as what we do, no, we're not going to do that. So I think directors need support too. I really do.
Yep, I definitely think we need to keep that, you know, circle back to UVEI. And, you know, capacity has changed. That's kind of the, that's where we are now. I've always thought my dream would be to like take the director's desk and take off collections and take off, you know, all the business pieces that they shouldn't have to be responsible for. And then that would reveal more time for them to enhance their leadership skills, to be determined. I wonder also, there's something that was said. Oh, I know. And David hopped off. Sharon, or I don't know, Andrew, if you have connections up there, but up in Bradford, there's a center that has a board member that is going through training that would like to be full-time staff, but she doesn't want to be board member and staff and parent. So
sounds like a good idea to me.
Yeah.
So yeah, it'd be great if you could find someone who wanted to be either a board member or a staff member. My thing is, maybe it's easier to find a board member. So for VCP up in Bradford. So I was going to actually hit up David that and see if he had any employees that lived up there. So yeah, they're looking for a board member, and then they'll get a full-time staff. So something like that.
Well,
and
I bet Brenda Metzler could support you on that, Brenda, on our team, because she works in the area pretty closely too.
I wonder if she would know parents. Okay, I'll reach out to Brenda and just let her know what's going on.
If she doesn't, she may not know parents, but she will absolutely know who to ask. She will know the people who know the parents.
Okay. All right.
Yep.
Then at least she could give up one of her roles right now she's subbing, but if she's a board member, that becomes a problem. So, and that is another, we've got all these different layers. We have new hires, potential hires, we have new hires, we have experienced staff, we have directors, and then we have nonprofit boards. And that's a whole nother piece that needs support in early childhood too. We have so many nonprofits that are just their boards are not well developed at all. We had touched on that a while back, but that's something I think that Vital Communities can help with. I really think Vital Communities, through all the layers that are here with the corporate council and everything, that they know a lot of people, they have employees, like, can we do
I have a question. Do you think that is, I know that experience really well. Both not having enough people for the board, or not having the right people for the board, or having a board that has plenty of people, but the board is not developed. And it's a strain. It's a big strain. Do you think it's an issue of needing more people, or do you think it's an issue of needing process to be facilitated so that there can be developed boards, or is it both?
It's in both.
I think it's both.
So that's what I figured. So I'm wondering whether, and I don't know which work group this actually would fit with, and possibly it's a steering committee issue, frankly, but I'm wondering if trying to gather some kind of small program where there are folks who, because there's lots of people who have incredible facilitation skills in the area, really good collective, shared purpose focused skill sets. Can we have some kind of a little pool of facilitators who are available for these nonprofits? It wouldn't take them much time, frankly. I don't think. You give them a portfolio of who you have on your board, what you think, then the directors, what you think the needs are, and they could at least furnish you with here's some recruitment ideas, or people to places to look. They could feed that information back to Vital Communities, to the initiative, and we could support that. And once you have the people, they could also be, giving some facilitation to the boards. It would be, even 2 board meetings with a really good facilitator can do a whole lot, really, to build it's building capacity in the board to be functional, highly functional, exceptionally functional. So I'm wondering if that, I'm not sure which work group, maybe that's a programs and facility model thing, or steering committee, I'm not sure, but I don't think it's recruitment and retention. Yeah.
It's definitely both, and as far as getting the right people and training and facilitating or working with the people that are already there, because I'm hearing both things.
I think my experience has, at this point, I've really just I've had this lesson kind of hit me over the head in the past few years, is that you can have the most passionate, highly educated people in a room together, and if they don't have some kind of facilitated process, it can become a circus real quick.
Yeah.
I don't think culturally we just are not taught how to work together really well, and to how to advise together, and make decisions together. And I think, some boards obviously need more shaking up than others, or more support than others, but I don't know. I feel like that would be hugely helpful to the directors, frankly.
Yeah,
I've seen a
it's
lot of
almost as
directors
if-
that just, yeah.
I was gonna say, you could almost imagine this initiative sort of having a kind of like an operations response team, right? They
Yeah.
could kind of go into childcare providers and do a quick analysis of their board, their budget, their staffing, just like, and I know that probably takes a lot of time. So it's a question of like, well, who does it and what's the capacity for it? But something like that addresses immediate needs as we are thinking about what it takes to build these bigger workforce systems, which are going to be a couple years in the making, right? Like, what can we do right now that's an immediate support while we're thinking about these sort of longer term support? So I like that idea. I'm not sure exactly what it looks like or what the supports are, but it's an interesting idea.
I wonder if that's an advocacy group. I'm just thinking of the people on the
I know.
advocacy.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah,
I don't know.
Michael, I agree. Like, I appreciate that point, because it is like, until and unless these other things change, how are we going to keep all these folks afloat, all these boats afloat?
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So
Thank you.
I know we're at the end of our time. Can I relay just a really quick story? I can do it in like probably 60 seconds, unless you
Of
guys
course.
need to run somewhere. But I was talking to Kathy Pellerin, who runs the Claremont Learning Partnership. And as part of the Claremont Learning Partnership, they have a childcare center called the One for All Family Space. But within their larger suite of programs, they also have a homeless shelter for teens, many of whom are teen moms with young kids. Many of those kids are enrolled in the One for All learning space. Back in January, she lost two of her staff, her longtime teaching staff. One went to open their own center and another just got burned out. It was like, I'm going to leave the field. She has been able to recruit 3 full-time staff from the teens that were living in her shelter and working through her program, who had kids in the center. So those moms would come and they would kind of volunteer and they'd play with their kids and the other kids. They started to think, oh, they knew that, or at least going to college was not even on their radar, right? But Kathy was able to mentor them to the point where she said, well, why don't you go take a class in child development? So they went and took a class, right? And now they're all enrolled in CDA programs and they're working as full-time educators within her program. She was able to get some variance from the state to do this, but just a really interesting way of building a pipeline from within if you have that sort of population that kind of could fit the field. So I just wanted to relay that. It was just kind of an interesting thing. So she's one of the only centers in the Upper Valley that we work with, and we fund like 20 plus centers in the Upper Valley that is fully staffed and fully enrolled to their licensed capacity. The only one that we work with. So anyway, it can be done.
Yeah, and it wouldn't even necessarily need to be under the same roof. You could partner with another. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, I put in the chat. That's very similar to the Families Learning Together program at the parent-child centers.
Yeah.
That was a wonderful program.
Yeah. So, and they're trying to bring that back in Vermont. I know a number of the family resource centers are building that capacity again. So,
but they were getting like wraparound. It was like, substance use support,
exactly.
Coaching, and then they have
coaches, life coaches, right? The whole 9 yards. Yep, exactly.
Yeah, I worked at a parent-child center for 3 years, and it is a really great model.
Yeah. Cool.
Thank you for that.
All right, I have to go, you all, but it was great talking.
Thank
Nice
you.
to see you all.
All right, yeah, see ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Have a great week.